I don't doubt that some of you this morning, as you listen to this message, are thinking about some of the heart in your own life. Some of the difficult times when you've struggled with God and wrestled with those questions. Your suffering is real this morning. Your questions are real, but you don't have to leave here without hope. You don't have to leave here without hope. What I say may not answer all your whys, but it should provide you with the assurance that Jesus understands what you're going through. And know that He is at work no matter where you are in life. The story comes to us in the Gospel of Mark in the 7th chapter. Jesus has an encounter with a deaf and mute man. And it's an interesting story, not necessarily because of the miracle of how God restores his hearing and his ability to speak, but it's what happens before the miracle. Listen to what it says in verse 34. Jesus looked up to heaven, and with a deep sigh he said to him, Ephphatha, which means be open. Did you catch it? Did you catch those words? Jesus sighed. It wasn't just it was a deep sigh. As Jesus held the face of this man in his hands, Jesus sighed. We're not used to thinking of Jesus as someone who sighs. We think of Jesus as someone who speaks, who commands, but not here. You see, as Jesus looked into the eyes of this victim of suffering, it brought about only one response from Jesus. He sighed. And he sighed deeply. Think about what was in that sigh. You can almost hear Jesus say, it was never intended to be like this. It was never supposed to happen this way. Your ears weren't made to be deaf. Your tongue wasn't made to stumble. The thought of all of the suffering that not only that man had gone through, but the suffering that you and I go through. Jesus sighed deeply because it wasn't the way it was intended to be. And in the agony that Jesus expresses in that sigh lays our hope. Had Jesus not sighed when he looked at that man, we'd be in a pitiful condition. Had Jesus just chalked it up to the inevitable or washed his hands of the whole stinking mess, what hope would we have? But Jesus didn't. Jesus didn't say, oh, it's just inevitable. Jesus sighed. And that holy sigh assures us that God is still groaning for all of his people, even in the midst of their suffering. And God groans with each of us every day, and he groans. And he sighs because he knows that this isn't the way it was intended to be. Jesus himself said that until he returned, there will be wars, and nations will rise against nations. Jesus said it himself that there will be famines and earthquakes. We could add hurricanes and tsunamis. You see, we live in a fallen world where there is pain and there is suffering, but God offers us hope. Hope. Because Jesus takes a hold of our face and He looks at us when we're going through that pain, and He promises us that He has an answer. And He provides us the hope that we need. When thousands were left without homes after Hurricane Katrina, people of faith responded. They responded because they had hope. And homes and lives have been rebuilt throughout the whole Gulf Coast. Not thanks to the government, but thanks mostly to people of faith. People who have turned over millions of dollars to charities. People who have given their sweat and their blood to work to rebuild homes. It all reminds us that even after the storm, God still speaks hope. Not only to the victims, but also to those who provide the help. And so in the midst of life's storms, hope survives. Until the day when Jesus sighs His last sigh. And suffering ends forever. I will stand with Jesus. I will stand with Jesus because the evidence is clear that only Jesus can offer us hope in the midst of our suffering. Only Jesus has promised us that He has overcome the world. That's enough evidence for me. No matter what kind of evidence the world throws at me, I will stand with Jesus.